Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. I'm your host, the Game Master. And before we get into today's episode, smash that like button, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. That helps us out on our end with the algorithm, but also we love hearing from you guys. We've got an awesome community here, and that's thanks to you. So thank you so much for being here. So, having said all of that, let's get into it. The prologue to this one is a recap of a few relevant facts. Our game began in 1985, and my mom was the original GM. She ran it in 85 and 86, and then from roughly 87 through 89, Greg Sheets and Wayne Birch took turns running it. In 1990, Jay Mora took over, and in 1992, hot on the heels of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, Jay ran this adventure where Powerhouse was abducted by Necron and taken 5 years into the future to August 29th of 1997, which in T2 is the date that they give for when Judgment Day takes place. And in our game world, on that date, Powerhouse saw what seemed to be the end of the world. And out of game, I took that seriously. Jay had basically started a countdown. And when I took over as the game master in 1994, the crisis was always kind of hanging over my head. And while we certainly ran plenty of games about other stuff, a lot of the games I did run had something to do with the idea of getting ready to deal with the coming crisis. And Powerhouse spent a lot of time trying to raise an army of characters to help him. And when August of 1997 finally rolled around in real life, I rented out the Village Hall in Bailey Lakes, Ohio. We got a fog machine. I wore a tuxedo that was red and blue. I even got the local Papa John's Pizza to sponsor the event and give us a bunch of pizza for free. Everyone who had ever played the game showed up, including previous players who no longer lived in the same state anymore. We rented a really nice sound system, and as the game began that night, I played an REM song called It's the End of the World as We Know It. And to this day, whenever one of my players hears that song on the radio, they send me a message on Facebook or something, and they're reminded of that night. And that was the night that the heroes lost. That was actually the night that Earth K died. Because it was the night that Kelson Barber broke the tuning fork, which has become a famous saying in my circle of friends. So, to make a very long story short, Kelson and I in college were best friends, but he was overworked. We actually worked at the same place. It was a grocery store. It's no longer in business now, but they treated both of us really bad. And Carlson in specific had to wake up every day at 2 a.m. to get ready for work because he worked in the bakery and he made all the donuts and stuff like that. And it had to be ready by the time the early birds showed up when the store opened. And then he would leave around opening time. Other people would work in the bakery and he would go straight to college. And then he'd be doing that all day. And then he'd be doing homework all night, right? So the poor guy was just stretched incredibly thin at the time, right? And so on the night that the crisis finally happened, Carlson was tired. And honestly, and if Carlson's listening to this, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I think we would both agree looking back that the better move probably would have been to just stay home and catch up on sleep or something like that, you know? But he knew that we had been gearing up for this event for literally years at this point, right? So Kelson showed up, even though he was tired. And he did play for a while. He did normal stuff that you would expect any player to do. And as the game began, I ran a series of encounters that were set in different years because that's what we saw in the actual Crisis on Infinite Earths comic book series, right? And in each of those time periods, the characters would be taken there by Tachyon, and a smaller, more manageable team of superheroes would have to fight off shadow demons in that specific time. And then when they were doing that, the other people would kind of talk to each other. And for a lot of the players, they were getting to know each other for the first time, right? Because they'd all played in different eras of the game, not necessarily all at once like this. Anyway, so it gets to this point in the adventure where everybody is supposed to be protecting this gigantic golden tower that was essentially a cosmic tuning fork. And, I don't want to go off on a huge tangent about it, but suffice it to say that this tower was vibrating, and those vibrations were helpful. The idea was it was going to cause the entire Earth to phase out of sync with a lot of the bad stuff that was happening in the crisis, right? But that is the point that Kelson just lost his temper. He called all of us a bunch of drunks, which was weird because like nobody was drinking. He flipped everybody off, which was not really the kind of thing he ever did. And at any rate, so his Green Lantern character made a giant hand out of glowing green energy, and then he smashed that tower. He destroyed the tuning fork. And then in real life, Kelson stormed out of the room and didn't want to be my friend anymore after that night. And it was just weird. From our point of view, it felt like it just came out of nowhere. And it just really took the wind out of everybody's sails, which sucks because like I said, we've been planning that party for years. And now, kind of like one by one, people felt awkward and started to file out saying, "Oh, I got somewhere else I have to be," which we all knew wasn't true. Everybody had set this night aside, right? And the whole event started to fall apart. Now, mind you, the diehard players, the ride or die guys, they were in it for the long haul, right? But in the end, no matter what the remaining heroes did, there was just no saving Earth K once that tower was destroyed. And Howard Warnes, who had been running this Golden Age game, and it had concluded by the time we got to August of 97, he knew that basically this was a possibility. So he had suggested a year earlier that we go on a quest to find a backup Earth. And we did. I'd made this new world with analogs of everybody from Earth K, but it wasn't the same. And so, like, instead of Wonder Woman, they had a character named Ultra Woman. Instead of Spider-Man, they had a character named the Cockroach. Instead of Batman, there was a character named the Wraith. Instead of Captain America, there was this guy named Patriot. And at the end, the very end of the crisis, the Nematon used its transporters and it tried to beam everybody on board. And it was sort of, in a way, like Noah's Ark, but in space. And instead of trying to save all the animals, it was trying to save all the superheroes, right? So everybody's characters, I didn't kill their characters off, but they all got on the Nematon, and then the Nematon, which can basically do everything the TARDIS can do, it traveled to this backup Earth. And once all the characters were there, we kept having adventures. In 1998, we fought an evil twin of Tachyon named Warp. In 1999, we fought a analog of Darkseid / Thanos, who I had named Nihilist. In the year 2000, we had this team called the Crusaders, They went on a ton of really awesome adventures. But while all of this was happening, a lot of the guys who had been with me the whole time, a lot of the older players, just missed Earth K. They couldn't get over the fact that it was gone. They were just unhappy, right? And then finally in April of 2001, DC Comics, excuse me, I'm sorry, DC Comics published this story arc called Return to Krypton. And in it, the central idea was basically that in order for the Phantom Zone to be humane, according to this particular writer, then no time should be able to pass there. His thing was, if you just banish people there forever, but there's no hope of parole or that kind of thing, he thought that was like cruel and unusual, basically. So he said there's no time there, like that it's a simple dimension that just doesn't have that quality, right? And Superman can open a door to the Phantom Zone from Earth, right? But back when Krypton was around, the people there were also able to open a door to the Phantom Zone because that's how they were putting criminals in there. So, according to this writer, who I want to say was maybe Joe Kelly, somebody like that, he said that there's no reason then why Superman shouldn't be able to enter the Phantom Zone from Earth, but then come out on Krypton, right? Does that make sense? Because if there's no time there, you can't say that Jor-El put Zod in whatever in the year 1900 and Superman let Zod out in 1938, or you know what I mean? Because there's no time. So Zod is going in at the same moment that he's escaping then. So therefore, Superman is going in the same moment that his dad was putting Zod in there. Again, if I say anything on the podcast that doesn't make sense, ask about it in the comment section and I'll try to do a better job of explaining it. Anyway, so this idea that they had with the Phantom Zone, I thought was genius, actually. And it got me thinking about the Bear's belt buckle, of all things. Because despite all of the stuff in our game that has changed over the years, the Bear / Powerhouse has worn the exact same belt buckle since day one. And it's not an ordinary belt buckle. We build it in DC Heroes using the gadget rules, and we gave it the Insta Change advantage. Insta Change, for anybody who doesn't know, is what would allow Diana Prince to spin in a circle, and then there'd be like a flash of light, and when the light fades, now she's suddenly wearing her Wonder Woman costume instead of her street clothes, right? Well, anyway, so way back when, I wanted the Bear to have this same power, basically, right? So for years, we had said that his belt buckle contained a pocket dimension. Nothing fancy, just this little dimension to keep his costumes in. And here's the thing, it was a simple dimension, right? It had height and width and depth, but nothing else. It didn't have that fourth dimension of time. So the heroes then, which obviously we got the idea out of game from that Superman comic, the heroes then use dimension travel to enter the dimension inside of his belt buckle and then exit the belt buckle the morning of the crisis. And one of the guys who was a time traveler who was used to play with us was a guy named Morgan Nordell. And ironically, he was yet another self-insert character who had a Green Lantern ring that had been created by Kelson Barbers old Green Lantern ring, right? So as soon as Morgan finds himself back in time, the day of the crisis, the first thing he does is he makes a glowing green sniper rifle and he goes looking for Kelson. So you see where that's going, right? So what he sets out to do, he accomplishes. I'll put it that way, because there's certain phrases I can't use on YouTube without getting a strike against my channel. But yeah, he does his thing, right? So then, because of that, Kelson cannot break the tuning fork. And we ended up replaying the entire crisis. We called all of the old players back. We said, here's what we're doing. And we had a mulligan. We redid the game, right? That it did fail the first time. It was the end of the world the first time, right? We redid it. And then this time around, the heroes won. And as I've mentioned several times on the podcast now, my brain tumor is getting slowly worse. So my son is getting ready to take over as game master, right? I didn't used to be the game master, and we're coming up on a time when I no longer will be the game master, at least not exclusively. And at any rate, so my son wanted the most pure version of the game as possible, right? And he wanted the original timeline. But like I told him, that road really ends here at this adventure. Uh, what he wants in terms of a thing that has never been rebooted or whatever doesn't exist after August 29th of 1997, because the crisis in this thing I was talking about where characters come back in time and they make some change, this was the beginning of a series of games that we ended up referring to as the Time Wars, where people kept coming back and creating these butterfly effects because whatever was going on in the game at the time, there was always some player that was unhappy with it. They wanted things to be the way they preferred, right? So, like I said, the idea of all these adventures so far are sort of like the most pure original versions of things. Since this game is the end of that, right? Then we had the Party of Immortals appear on this date as well. And like I said, everybody keeps coming back and doing something, right? It's just kind of something we've done a lot in the game over the years. And these immortals are actually the offspring of the bear from about 30 years in the future. And my son's self-insert character grants immortality to the bear on this date, which is actually more complicated than one might originally realize. Because normally what happens is a hero who has lived a long and eventful life and who has had a ton of adventures is granted immortality, and his physical body is no more. It just kind of disintegrates in a way, while his spirit is what becomes the immortal, right? But here's the thing, the bear is a changeling, and he has two souls. So one is this human guy named Chris Briggs. That part of him is what the Changeling, the Dreaming role-playing game by White Wolf would refer to as the mortal seeming. But the other part of him is the fairy mean. So that part is the entity that in Celtic mythology, the people who lived in Ireland at the time referred to that as the Dagda. He was the king of their pantheon, and he was also kind of like their Aphrodite, and he was kind of like known for being very powerful and stuff like that. And then In a later generation, he was called Beowulf by the Geats. And in the generation of William Shakespeare, he was known as Oberon. And in the generation of Camelot, he was Arthur, the once and future king, a guy who was destined to return one day. And of course, changelings do exactly that, right? They're reborn generations later. So anyways, immortality is bestowed to both Arthur and Chris, and they are separated. They're no longer fused together and stuck being this one being. They're transformed, and they finally become two different characters. And so, with Kelson now gone, Chris, the human, finds the Green Lantern ring that Kelson was using, and he puts it on. And by the way, from Chris's point of view, Kelson had not done anything wrong, right? His best friend got taken out by Morgan for seemingly no reason, because he doesn't know what we know out of game, right? Arthur doesn't take time to mourn, though. There are more threats that need dealt with. For instance, on Earth K, we also said this is the same day when Onslaught is being a problem. And that was a huge comic book storyline that also came out that at that same time. So now that he's an immortal, Arthur is totally immune to everything that Onslaught does. So Arthur takes him out. And when Necron has his final battle with the heroes, Tachyon sends Necron back in time, creating a time loop. And Necron is damaged from the fight. And all he knows is that the heroes were too powerful in 1997 and they beat him, right? So the epilogue to this game session starts with where the continuum began, with Necron going to Swallens, and he tells the younger versions of the characters from the first game that Jay played in and the first game that Ryan was in. He tells them that, they're younger and weaker and he's going to destroy them before they are a problem for him in the future, right? And that adventure's on our podcast. So we're just in a little time loop there now. But anyway, yeah, that's it. That was the Crisis. We played part of that, like I said, in 1997. We played part of it in 2001. We've revisited it multiple times through the years. And then we played part of it here recently in 2026. In the end, on our end, we're pretty happy with how it went this time around. Hopefully you guys enjoyed hearing about it too. If so, as always, smash like, make sure you're subscribed, and leave us a comment. And from everybody here at the longest running superhero role-playing game on Earth, we hope you have a good one, and we'll see you in the next time. Bye.